October 29th, this week's code of conduct. Ben, take it away.
Start on time. Be prompt. The one thing I have about this one is if you're not going to make it on time, call ahead. And having safety in mind is don't try to go 80 miles an hour to get somewhere when you think you can make it. Just call ahead and let people know. It's more important to be respectful of people so that they can get on with what they're doing than wondering for 15 minutes where you are or getting in an accident. So I guess that's the most important thing for me on that one.
Yep, well said. Let's not make compound mistakes. And then, unfortunately, we did have a recordable injury last Friday. We had a pinch point that got us in about 10 stitches in a pinky. So again, fingers, hand placement, fingers. Let's use bars as much as possible. Let's just try not to put our hands in dangerous situations where we could potentially, especially heavy objects like Jersey barriers or equipment, anything like that, that really, when it comes to working low limits and stuff, our fingers are definitely the more susceptible. Is not as strong, as durable as steel or concrete and things like that. So let's just kind of think where you're going to put your hands before you put your hands in those dangerous spots. So with that said, I'm going to kick it over to Amy over at PT360 for another wellness series. We're going to talk about rotator cuffs.
Good morning. All right, did that switch over?
Yes, it did.
Excellent. All right, so this morning we're going to talk about rotator cuff injuries. I'm sure most of you either had one or know somebody that's had one. So rotator cuff is actually 4 muscles. They start on your shoulder blade and they end up on your humerus, which is the long bone of your arm. One of the muscles is in the front of your shoulder, and then 3 of them are in the back of your shoulder, one in that little fossa, and then 2 right below it. And what they do is they literally cuff the shoulder. They form a little kind of cap around your shoulder. It helps control it. So how does the rotator cuff work and why is it so important and why do we always talk about it? So what it does is it keeps the ball of the shoulder centered in the socket. So you can see the long bone of your arm. The top of that is a ball and socket joint. The socket being, oh my goodness, here we go. The glenoid fossa. And as you raise your arm up, that cuff of muscles keeps the ball centered in the joint so it doesn't hit that little roof overhead, which is really important because on this next slide, you can see there's a lot of stuff between the shoulder and the roof overhead. So if that ball is sliding up and hitting that roof, we're pinching a lot of things, including the rotator cuff muscles. And you can see there's about 1 centimeter of space there. So if there's a little bit of movement, that can pinch those rotator cuff muscles. As we slouch forward with poor posture, as our shoulders get tighter, that decreases that 1 centimeter of space. How do we injure our rotator cuff? One of the big ones is falling on an outstretched arm. So if you are walking on a job site, you don't see something under your feet, you take a spill and you reach out and catch yourself with your arm, that can pinch that shoulder, pinch those rotator cuff muscles and cause a little tear. Say you're walking down a steep embankment, all of a sudden you slip, but you reach your arm up for a tree to try to catch yourself. Great, you catch yourself with that tree, but you get this big jerking motion. That can also lead to a rotator cuff tear, a partial tear. Or say you're carrying something, as Matt just said, with somebody else, they slip and drop that weight, and all of a sudden you catch it unexpectedly. That can also lead to tearing of the rotator cuff. So those are acute injuries. Those are those big uh-oh moments. It can also occur from repetitive stress. And we'll talk about repetitive stress a lot. So doing something over and over and over again, whether that's acutely over, say, starting a new job or over weeks or months or years. You guys are just finishing up this season, I think. We might get snow soon. And having all that stress over a long period of time and not doing something about it. So this can happen over weeks, months, or years. The years one we usually see in our 40 plus crowd. So people that have been doing, say, mechanic work overhead for a long time, as our shoulders get tighter and stiffer and a little less strong as we age. That kind of, again, decreases that little 1 centimeter of space, but we're still doing those same motions of working overhead. I feel like biggest sign, since it's a muscle and tendon, is weakness in your arm. A lot of times what we'll see or what people complain of is they try to raise their arm up and all of a sudden they can't, or it's really painful. You go to reach for a gallon of milk in the fridge and all of a sudden you start to shrug your shoulder up, your elbow comes up and you can't lift that up normally. Pain's usually on the outside of your shoulder. And we often hear of pain at night. So laying on that side or even laying on the other side with the arm hanging tends to be pretty painful. So what do we do to treat it? Biggest thing is always modifying your activities. So what's causing the pain? And can we do something different? Do we need to stretch a little bit before you're going to work under a vehicle? If you're going to be doing a lot of lifting, again, do we activate those muscles first? Can we take frequent breaks? So that might just mean 10 seconds of shaking that arm out or stretching while you're on lunch break or activating those muscles. It doesn't take much, but those little things can go a long way. And probably the most important is seeking treatment if it is bothering you. So if you've had pain for 3 days and pain being like you really can't lift your arm up, or an acute pain where you just had a big uh-oh moment and you definitely can't lift your arm up, that's where you want to see PT, urgent care, your doctor to see what the next step is. This is something you don't want to let go, because if, say, you go back to work the next day, you're trying to do all these overhead or lifting movements and you can't, it's just going to worsen and worsen and worsen. So we want to address it as soon as possible. So in PT, what we do for it is a little bit of soft tissue work. So a lot of the time there's these muscle imbalances. Anyone that's had it, their upper trap tends to get really tight because that tends to take over and it actually limits your motion even more. So to massage that out. Stretching, particularly the chest muscles, again, as you pull, your shoulders get pulled forward, it puts those cuffed muscles in a bad position. And then strengthening those rotator cuff muscles. And that's probably the most important part, is getting those muscles strong again. Even if there is some partial tearing in it, the fibers that are still intact can do a really good job of taking over so you don't have to get surgery. That is all I have for today.
Thank you, Amy. Very informative.
You're
If
welcome.
anyone out there wants some more stretching advice or any other issues, feel free to contact Health and Safety and we'll get everybody going on some wellness over at PT 360. Ken, are you going to take it away?
Yep. Okay. Thank you, Amy. I know I've had a rotator cuff injury before. It's not fun and it takes a long time to recover from it. I know that. Like, I think it was a year before I'd forgotten I had the injury.
It sure can. Yep.
Okay, I'm gonna switch to my screen. No. I think this is the right one. Yep, do you see my screen?
We can.
Okay, good. So for announcements this week, we have open enrollment starting for the ECI benefit program, and that includes all the health, the dental, some additional life insurance, accident and critical illness insurances. So all that stuff's opening up. We have it dated November 1st, but certainly if you have questions, start researching it right away. You can see Scott Dean in the administrative office, or you can call him directly on the phone. And we'll have more details next week. So there'll be I believe, a flyer in the paycheck next week, and we'll go over it briefly in the email or in the safety meeting. And it'll be listed here as a connection or a link, a document link in the email. So cooler days are coming. So we need to start thinking about treating fuel with the diesel fuel supplement. That's the white container. And also I still have on here the document link to the Pet Food Warehouse discount app. If you haven't used it, check it out. We have one new employee. This is Chance Humphrey. Chance looks pretty excited about getting started, apparently, with a concrete division. So welcome to Chance, and hope to see you around. For Breast Cancer Awareness Month, we're closing out pretty much this weekend the month of October, which is Breast Cancer Awareness Month. And the gang here of Sarah in Alberta have pretty much driven this whole fundraising process with the pink t-shirts, and they're up to $4,347 raised for the American Cancer Society. So thank you very much and congratulations for the two of you for taking a lead on this and getting it done. We have a link for the primary care wellness program. And for weather, as we said earlier, today's supposed to be a pleasant sunny day. Looks like calm winds and a little morning fog, but this weekend is going to get wet. Saturday is supposed to be a drencher with a little bit more on Sunday. So if you got a job site that's sensitive to heavy rain, then button it up for the weekend because it might be coming down pretty hard, it looks like. For the COVID policies, no changes, just adjustment to the percent vaccinated in Vermont is up to 89.7, so closing in on 90%. And for this week, we're going to talk about the Sharon project, and Ben McKinney is going to present. Ben, you want to take over the screen, or do you want to use my screen?
Yeah, I'll share mine.
Okay, and then you can follow up with the project archive photo.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Okay.
Can you see that?
We can.
Great. So ECI's contracted with VTrans on this 2-season twin bridge rehab project. The existing 4-span continuous steel girder bridges over 89 or on 89 over the White River and Route 14 were built in the 60s. Our project generally involves back wall replacement, approach slab, scupper, and finger joint replacement, bridge painting, which is subbed out, large-scale deck rehab, approach paving, and structural steel rehab. Our work also included a lane crossover, which diverts one barrel of the interstate, drops both down to one lane, and puts them with continuous traffic all on the one side. So you do one bridge one season, one bridge the next season. I think we've all probably driven on a crossover. There's no lane closures, no roadblocks, no disruption to traffic besides putting it down to one lane. They're not super complicated, but just making it all happen without disrupting traffic and doing it safely. Especially once you have them over there, you really can't do anything because it's down to one lane and you can't reduce it any further. So even little things like temp striping, the phasing becomes pretty important. So the original decks were skewed, which you can kind of see in this picture a little bit. It doesn't show it really well because it's straight on, but the original decks are skewed to the road, and they also have a parabolic crown. And unlike a regular crown that we're used to seeing with, say 2% in each direction to get that water, to the curbs and drains, or in this case, scuppers, a lot, maybe not a lot, but some of these old interstate bridges actually had a parabolic crown. So instead of being a straight grade from center line, it actually, the further away you get, the more it breaks. So it's actually a round crown. This created some fun.
On that old drawing, VTrans drawing above, it has a profile of that at the top.
Yeah, good point. Yeah, you can kind of notice it there. Yeah, actually, that's exactly where they show it. They show it breaking, you go 30 inches, you drop an eighth, another 30 inches, a half, another 30 inches, an inch and 7/16, all the way up to the last 3 feet. You get a 4.5 inch drop. So it's really breaking sharply away.
Right.
That shows it well. That also, it shows, it's kind of funny that's not actually how the bridge works. What they're doing is they're showing 2 bays at the haunched. These are continuous spans, so you actually get your, not to get into too much detail, but you actually get an inverted moment. So where the bridge would want to be like a normal beam, it actually, you get a flip between the tension and the compression of the flanges at the support, which is part of and it's the usually the controlling bending force. So that's why they haunch them very deeply over the supports at these continuous spans. But anyway, that's what they're showing here. So they're showing the very deep section of the girder at the supports here, and then the typical normal span section of the girder over here. So these don't actually occur in the same spot. It's kind of a funny way to show it. But yeah, the parabolic crown definitely made for some fun challenges and both our forming and finishing, as well as the fabrication for the finger joints. The structural steel work was minor in tonnage. We didn't have a lot of tonnage that went into the bridge, but you know, the complexity, is just especially the geometry of everything, was fairly intense. And what it was is the existing bracing in these two outside bays had gotten saltwater splash from the drains and the scuppers over the years, and it was pretty heavily corroded. So we had a lot of tab plates and stiffeners and diaphragm and bracing angles that needed to be replaced. But with this bridge, unlike most of our rehabs, we actually had connections that were welded to the existing girders, which is pretty uncommon. You don't see that a lot. The agency, for good reason, gets I'm not nervous, but they're pretty careful with putting that kind of heat into these big members that are under stress. So for QC and QA, we actually had 100% of our girder welds required MT testing, magnetic particle testing, and 25% of our full penetration welds on stiffeners and tab plates and other members got UT tested. That's something that ECI did on a QC level and V-Trans verified using a consultant. And just scrolling down through here, we got our TCC 450 nice and close, got it down in the hole on a crane pad. We really cut off our own access. So later, once we had approach slabs, we built mini bridges to get back over. But for a while, the bridge was an island and we were flying everything over. The approach slab in this picture and back walls are both done, and we're working on the last section of deck to form before the finger joint was set. And you can see, at least the skew, if not the crown, but you can see the skew coming into play there. There's the crew using our truss screed on screed rails to finish that special crown into the approach slab. It's like a good wet cure. There's the finger joint in place, ready to be supported. Good shot of the crew. Our temporary support was fairly simple, and we used some lifting beams in a little bit of a different way with some threaded rods so we could make some fine adjustments. These things were pretty stiff, but we still had quite a bit of adjustment to do. Both for gap, depending on the ambient temperature, and just to get that correct profile. For full deck rehab, this looks like we're probably a morning of a pour, or we're close to it. Looks like we're ready to fill some holes here. We did a lot of this by hand for a while, and it just wasn't. It was working. It was just looked like we'd still be doing it in December. So we ended up bringing a hydroblasting sub to speed things up. The quantities overran by over double, which just resulted in a lot more work, which was okay, but it was clear that we needed to come up with a faster method. So we brought these guys up out of Pittsburgh. They use this machine to use extremely high pressure water to do the demo, and to getting the depth can be a little tricky, and there's a ton of cleanup and support that they needed from us, but it was definitely a good way to do it. I think it was like 30,000 psi. That may not be right, but I think is a 30,000 psi jet.
35,000, Ben.
Nice, thank you.
They had some serious bumps there.
Yeah, that you can see it in one picture. One of the tractor trailers in the background. Right. So that's the pump itself is that's providing the pressure through those hard lines all the way up to the machine, right?
Yeah. So also, Ben, those finger joints, how they were already prefabbed to the right parabolic curve, and so our work had to fit those finger joints exactly right, correct? And we did a great job at it.
Yeah, that's right. So, in theory, they built it to that detail that we showed from the original drawings. And they did pretty good. It was a good looking joint. It wasn't exact. They have so much welding on these. They actually shrunk an inch. They actually shrunk an inch. Putting just so much heat into these. You can't. It's hard to see from this. It looks just like they're all just built up with bolts, but there's a ton of weld on these things. And that, as you can imagine, can create shrinkage and distortion and warping. And so, yeah, so not only did we already have an approach slab, which we had to do but way before these were done and on site. So we have an approach slab at contract grade, and then we've got to kind of make everything match each other, which we did, and they ride pretty good. There's the guys pouring the last section of deck there on the north side. Finger joint in place. You can see our painting sub up top. It looks like that's still their vacuum blast media recycler unit, and the containment. It's a suspended staging system that they put up, but that we also utilized for steel and for some of our full depth rehab. We were down there quite a bit. Looks like that's the intermediate coat on the bridge. Nice bright white before the final coat. The guys fitting up a connection. You can kind of see that was welded in the back, and then they're making up a bolted connection between it. Kind of different to have combined bolted and welded connections. These aren't really combined bolted and welded, on the same exact member, but these plate assemblies have 3 members going off them, so you have both. There's a new paint, nice and shiny. I had one picture that we forgot to get in here. I think it's a neat one. It shows. Let's see if I can find it. It's from further away. There we go. Kind of neat just to see the difference between the paint shades. They look a little off for now, but they'll look good when they're both done. And we've got deck paving over that torch applied membrane. The guy's pulling from that finger joint, and there's final pavement, finger joint, line striping all done, just with some approach rail to put on before we open it up.
Ben, can you go back to the email? Thanks.
You see it, right?
Yeah, we're back on it. Thanks.
I saw it anyway. I never lost it.
Oh, must be a delay on my part. Sorry about that.
And yeah, so now things are back open. We've achieved that milestone. The northbound is open to traffic, and we're just using the next month to finish the next phase of crossovers, and also get the suspended staging up on the southbound side, which will be great. That'll let us get all our templating and measuring done, and get steel fabrication drawings started, and get steel coming, which really should accelerate things for the next phase dramatically, comparing to waiting until September to get steel. So we're excited to take a big chunk of the long lead time items out for next year early. So from the archives. So this is the same bridge. So Hugh Strobel, who some of you might remember, worked as a VTrans inspector, back in the 60s. And so these are actually his photos that he sent to us once he knew that we had won this contract. So this is Jeanette Brothers, which is now known as Chimbro, building this back in the 60s when they built the interstate. So you can see those really nice looking tall piers, and what appears to be a 3-crane pick, or at least a 3-crane repositioning, whether they actually lofted up with all 3 cranes, relatively small lattice boom crawlers, hoisting those big haunched girders over the first pier.
We wouldn't do that these days. We'd have bigger cranes and more redundancy, and probably wouldn't do a 3-crane pick. And we're not certain it's a 3 crane, as we Ben and I looked at this when we first got the pictures and analyzed it, and it seems like they're repositioning to allow a 2 crane. That's the
Yeah.
conclusion I came to.
I think you're right. Also, some nice concrete counterweights on the crane on the bank. But definitely neat to see that era construction, especially on the bridge that we were working on. Don't see a ton of fall protection. And so, yeah, they must have built them in, the red lead primer, and then you field painted them green. So pretty neat to see pictures from that era.
So this bridge in the foreground is the one that Hugh was assigned to. And he took pictures of the big crossing bridge when he was out there and had his camera. Obviously, Hugh has always been a big photographer, and he's provided some great documentation of our work and obviously previous projects he's been on.
Yeah, agreed. I think that's all we got.
Perfect. Thank you, Ben. Okay. See you later, Matt. Be safe
Awesome
out there,
job.
everybody.
Yeah, awesome job. That project was a lot of fun to follow and track. Excellent job.
Sure was.
To Phil and crew down there, there's a lot of hazards, and they did a really good job controlling those. So,
Yep.
Job well done. Let's be safe today. Let's get out there and enjoy it. Have a good
Okay.
day, everybody.
Talk to you later.
Later.